Hi, this is Victorian Lit, the Hamley twins, and today we're going to be talking about Edith, one of the three girls in, well, one of the three protagonists in the Hamley twins. As a young lady, she was the epitome of what was expected to be a good girl. Father of, I'm sorry, daughter of a bishop and a mother who had the same beliefs. A quote from page 137 says, Edith, by descent, by teaching, by association, and in virtue of the complete ignorance in which she had been kept, was essentially one of that set. It is impossible for any adult creature to be more spiritually minded than she was. She lived in a state of exquisite feeling. The whole training of her mind had been directed as to make her existence one long beatific vision, and she was unconsciously prepared to resent in her gentle way, and to banish at once, if possible, any disturbing thought that might break upon it. She, as well as her mother, practiced the utmost ignorance, making her a very innocent and pure minded girl. Again, this was horror for her. This was all she was, basically. She practiced her faith deeply and was thought to believe in the good of everyone. That being said, she did not like to know about their wrongs and didn't think it mattered. She thought that it made a better difference and a better help to completely disregard them and instead just believe in the person so they can, with that encouragement, become better. General attitudes for middle class Victorian girls. So, one of the things discussed when it comes to Effie is religion. Most Victorians followed Christianity, although there was a lot of diversity in denominations. Innocence. The less girls knew the world, the purer they were thought of, making it unwomanly to learn more than deemed necessary. This overall made submission easier and allowed men to continue their double standards. Foreshadowing. There are two cases of foreshadowing in Edith's story that are almost spot on to what she goes through in the future. The first one is the dream of the sick newborn. So, before we are given the dream, we are introduced as Edith to Edith as this God fearing girl who only has pure thoughts and more than anything, pure feelings. But then she has a dream, and in page 137, it states, He held the little child out to her. She took it from him, smiling, raising its little velvet cheek to hers, and then drew back to look at it, but was horrified because it was not beautiful at all as it happened the moment before, but deformed, and its poor little body was covered with sores. The sight sickened her, and she tried to cover it with her own clothes. Another case of foreshadowing came in page 139 on her way back home. On the way back, Edith noticed a beggar, a young, slender, very delicate looking girl, lying across the footpath with her feet toward the road. A tiny baby lay on her lap. Little did she know that she was going to actually meet this girl in the future and be surprised by the relatability that they both have. The acquaintance. She makes an acquaintance with Sir Mosley Mennett, gaining interest in him through his constant attention. They see each other at parties, at any social event, really. A lot of times, Sir Mosley is the one looking for her. And the proposal. Sir Mosley Mennett ends up proposing to her, but when Bonnie finds out of this, she tries to prevent it, having a bad feeling of the man. Edith believes that even if he were to be bad, she will do her duty and redeem the man. Her mother shows great support to this. A direct quote from page 200 says, "Well, if he is," said Edith, with a flash of enthusiasm, "if he is bad, I will make him good. If he is lost, I will save him." "Spoken like a true woman, dearest," her mother said, rising to kiss her, and then standing back to look up at her with yearning love and admiration. It is not surprising that they were so open to taking a man in, because men were usually excused for any quote unquote mistakes or quote unquote temptations they've had before entering marriage. And it was up to the woman to basically rein him back in and be his moral compass. The marriage. And that marriage with with Sir Mosley Minute ended up being a pretty sick and cold one. An expert from page 234 says, Edith Beale had now been married for more than a year to Sir Mosley Menteith, and the whole of their life together had been, to her, a painful period of gradual dissolution, and all the more painful because she was totally unprepared even for the possibility of any troubles of the kind which had beset her. Many couples, before they are married, do not know each other very well, and even if there was an attempt to know each other very well, the man would often wait until after marriage, most times shortly after their honeymoon, to start really being his true self, whether that is nasty and just things generally that are not pleasing to anybody. But as divorce was completely discouraged, if even possible, which it was very hard to obtain most times, not all the times, they would not get a divorce. So they were stuck with each other basically. After having relations with her husband, she is transmitted a disease that is also transmitted to her newborn. Now, this disease ends up making, which is syphilis, ends up making Edith very sick and ill. A quote from Sir Mosley reads from page 237. And by Jove, he thought, it's an excellent idea, for she's looking anything but nice at present. Marriage is certainly a lottery. A fellow chooses a girl for her health and beauty and gives her everything she can want in the world, and in less than a year she's a wreck. The injury done to himself implied this last reflection, caused a certain amount of irritation, which betrayed itself in the politely nagging tone of his reply. He is taking no accountability for why she became so ill, and visibly so, for the matter. But that is not new from Sir Mosley Mineth or the attitude of many other men who would have been in his same position. The passion of the relationship henceforth was fading, and it was doing so very quickly through the decline of Edith's looks. Her husband was losing all interest in her, and the act of being barely agreeable was becoming scarce. There was a moment during their conversation in page 238 where he was actively being flirtatious with a girl through looks, well, again, in the conversation with Edith. It reads, "To what, dear?" he asked, without interrupting an exchange of amorous glances which was just then going on between himself and the girl on the beach. Overall, Sir Mosley was not going to be faithful. Her end. So she ended up visiting home after feeling very ill and not getting any of the support she needed with Sir Mosley Minute. And her parents saw her visibly unwell. They were worried about her, but Angelica, one of the heavenly twins, took her out to see the girl and the baby that Edith has seen back in the foreshadowing case, and met with her. Now, I will read a short excerpt that describes the story of this woman. It's from page 246. Well, it was in this way, the girl rejoined, speaking in the prosaic tone in which her countrywomen are accustomed to discuss matters that inspire ours with too much disgust to be mentioned. Mentet came after me, and my sister wanted money, so she made me believe that he couldn't marry me because there was a law to prevent it. She said he loved me, and if I loved him well enough, it would be a noble thing to do to disregard the law, and he gave her £75 for that. I found her letter to Mentate about it, and I've got it here, tapping the bosom of her gown. He took me abroad when he wanted to get rid of me, and left me in Paris with £5 in my pocket, but it was enough to bring me back. I was sick when I landed at Dover, and they sent me to the workhouse. And when I got well again, I told him I had friends. I told them I had friends in Morning Quest, and they gave me a little help to get there. But I had to tramp most of the way, and I was weak. I couldn't have gotten as far as I did if I hadn't wanted to kill them both. So she has also been transmitted the disease and also transmitted the syphilis to her child, who was weak and had sores all over. Keep in mind, this was premarital sex and in a form prostitution, as her sister sold her for that. Sir Mosley is not a good guy. He was all for it. He was completely deceiving, and still he has no idea, or at least fails to acknowledge, why women keep on getting sick with him. And this is very much shown whenever she's in her deathbed. And her husband, instead of worried, instead of taking any blame, is annoyed. Very much so. A quote from page 253 goes, I wish to God I hadn't answered that telegram so promptly, coming to be made an exhibition of by a sick woman in her tantrums, Menthade reflected as he walked down the corridor. I'm surprised at Edith, but it is so like a woman. You never know. You never can count on them. Now, let's talk about syphilis for a bit. Syphilis is a venereal disease that was transmitted by men to women, or vice versa, if the prostitution carried syphilis and then transmitted it to the men, um, and woman to child. So some women would get sick and transmit it to their child. Some women would exhibit no symptoms of it and still transmit it to their child. Some women would be ill but would not transmit it to their child. And if it was transmitted, the baby could be born dead, or it could be born with sores, and a general way of putting it was looking old. Basically wrinkly and just not as a baby should look or in any way be of help. There were many cases of syphilis because of the use of prostitution. And it was greater in bigger cities because there was more movement and people were just coming in and out. They were going from place to place. So it was just spreading. There was an attempt to lessen prostitution in the cases of syphilis, but this attempt only harmed women and excused the men participating in it. But that was Victorian Lit, the Heavenly Twins. Edith, she was truly an exceptional girl for the Victorian age. She did everything right. She was completely innocent, pure, and that's what eventually caused her demise.